Hey Reddit, my name's Samantha Price, I am 27, and buckle up because this story is about to take you on an actual ride, quite literally. I need to start from the beginning so you understand the full picture. I grew up in what I would call a rare kind of household. Respect was not just taught, it was lived every single day. If I shut my bedroom door, my parents did not barge in. If I said I needed space or alone time, it was given. But when help was needed, no one kept score, no one sighed about being inconvenienced, and no one had to beg. We simply showed up for each other. My father, Michael, was the living, breathing example of this. He was the kind of man who worked himself to the bone but never once let us feel like we were a burden. His motto was always, "Family does not keep score, but family always shows up." He was my role model, my rock, and then life decided to do what life so cruelly does sometimes. My father got sick. Not the kind of sick you recover from, but terminally sick. Within a year he was gone, and that year was the darkest pit I have ever been trapped in. It was just me and my mother, Laura, staring down hospital bills we could not afford. Grief so heavy it crushed the air out of our lungs, and the emptiness of trying to exist without the man who had been the glue that held us all together. I had always been a helper. Back in high school, I picked up shifts at the local diner, just so I could chip in for groceries when the hospital bills started piling up. Later, after graduating from college, I landed a job as a junior graphic designer at a small ad agency in Columbus, Ohio. It was not glamorous and it did not pay big money, but it was steady and it kept me afloat. I pinched pennies, saved every chance I got, and after months of obsessively hunting deals, I finally bought my first real grown-up purchase, a Tesla Model S. It was used, not the shiny showroom kind, but to me it was priceless. That car was not just metal and wheels. It was independence, proof that I could stand on my own even after life ripped out the foundation under me. For a while it was just me and Mom again, healing slowly and trying to carve out a new normal. Then came Carl. Now, if you are picturing some kind, dependable man who swept my grieving mother off her feet, stop right there. Carl was like a midlife crisis that somehow gained human form. He was 48, worked in what he called freelance sales, which from what I could tell meant unemployed with bursts of shady hustling, and he dressed like a rejected extra from an early 2000s boy band. Rhinestone jeans, bedazzled belts, frosted tips, Ed Hardy shirts, the whole disaster package. He even said voila with a straight face. My best friend Heather once took one look at him and called him Wishtaham Guy Fieri. And honestly, I have never heard a description more accurate in my life. I wanted to give him a chance because my mom deserved happiness, and I told myself maybe Carl was her way of moving forward. At first he was annoying but tolerable. He cracked bad jokes, bragged about big deals he was closing that never seemed to exist, and strutted around like he was hot stuff. Then came the car situation. Carl did not own a car. He always had excuses. His old truck was in the shop. He was between vehicles, or leasing was a scam. Meanwhile, there I was with my slightly used but beautiful Tesla. And Carl started asking for little favors. Hey, you've got the car. Can you run us to the store? Or, since you're already heading that way, can you drop me off real quick? At first, I thought maybe being kind would help him see me as family. I was wrong. What started as small favors turned into me becoming his full-time unpaid chauffeur. I was driving him to dentist appointments, his bowling league nights, even chauffeuring him and my mother on their dates. Imagine the awkwardness of dropping them off at a restaurant, and then sitting in the parking lot waiting for them to finish dinner, because Carl insisted it was cheaper this way. My car payments, my charging costs, my time, it all became his free lifestyle plan. The breaking point came one night when Carl left his phone on the counter while grabbing snacks. A text notification lit up from one of his buddies that said, "You there?" And Carl's reply read, "Yeah, my taxi's got me. Be there in 10. Taxi. I was not his girlfriend's daughter. I was not a person helping out of kindness. I was his taxi. Something inside me snapped when I saw those words. The next week, Carl asked me to drive him to his poker night. I smiled sweetly and said, "Of course." But I already had my plan. Instead of taking him straight there, I started accidentally making wrong turns. Oops, must have taken the wrong exit. Crazy traffic tonight, huh? I kept circling neighborhoods, dragging the ride out 30 extra minutes while he sat there in the passenger seat tapping his rhinestone belt buckle against my console like a ticking time bomb. Eventually, I pulled up to a random gas station and smiled at him. I told him, "Guess I am just a bad taxi driver." The look on his face was priceless. That was only round one. Round two came when I decided to make every single car ride with him absolute torture. The moment he buckled in, I blasted Disney Channel throwback songs at full volume. Imagine a 48-year-old man in rhinestone jeans trying to maintain his fake swagger while Hannah Montana belted Best of Both Worlds on repeat. He squirmed in his seat like a kid at the dentist. Round 3 was a personal favorite. Anytime Carl gave me vague directions like, drop me at Mike's, I deliberately misunderstood. Instead of his poker buddy Mike who lived 10 minutes away, I drove him across town to another Mike. Every single time, he would explode yelling at me and I would just shrug and say, you have to be more specific, Carl. Taxis make mistakes. But the finale, the masterpiece, was his so-called big interview. He claimed it was the job that would finally get him back on his feet. He begged me for a ride, insisting this was his chance to prove himself. I told him I would take him. The morning of the interview, I simply did not show up. My phone lit up with 20 missed calls and 30 texts, and when I finally answered, I told him, oh my bad. Taxi service must have been fully booked today. Then I hung up. He missed the interview. At first, Mom was furious when she found out. She thought I had been cruel. But then I showed her Carl's text where he referred to me as his taxi. I watched her face shift as if a curtain had been pulled back. For the first time, she did not defend him. She did not scold me. She just let out a long sigh, the kind of sigh that told me she finally saw what I had been living with. 2 weeks later, Carl quietly packed his rhinestone jeans, frosted tips kit, and Ed Hardy shirts and left. No drama, no grand goodbye. Just gone. Now it is just me and Mom again. Back to healing and figuring out how to live without constant nonsense weighing us down. My Tesla is mine again and my time is mine again. And the lesson I took from all this? Family helps family. But if you treat someone like a free Uber instead of a human being, don't be surprised when your ride gets permanently canceled. After Carl left, the house felt strange at first. You would think it would be immediately peaceful, but the truth is it felt eerily quiet. For months, our home had been filled with his constant chatter, his overblown stories about deals that never happened, and his loud presence that seemed to take up more space than it should. When he was gone, the silence felt almost foreign. I could tell Mom was struggling with that silence more than she admitted. At first, she pretended everything was fine. She cleaned out the small closet he had claimed as his own, boxed up the last of his ridiculous clothes, and even gave me the honor of tossing his rhinestone belt into the donation pile. We laughed about it, but behind her smile I saw the cracks. One evening when I came home late from work, I found her sitting at the kitchen table staring at her phone. Not scrolling, not texting, just staring at the black screen like she was waiting for it to light up. She quickly brushed it off when I walked in, but I knew. She was not missing Carl, she was missing the idea of not being alone. Eventually, after a lot of awkward dinners and me gently pushing, Mom finally admitted it. She said that she had been lonely for so long and ignored every red flag because Carl made her laugh. For a widow who had spent years grieving my dad, laughter felt like oxygen. She said it had been easier to look away from the truth than face the fact that she had let a man use both of us. She confessed that the moment she saw that taxi text, it was like a bucket of cold water had been poured on her. She could not ignore it anymore. What followed was not instant healing. It was messy. She had days when she was angry at herself, days when she would try to defend Carl even after everything, and days when she would cry because she felt embarrassed for falling for him in the first place. I reminded her that grief does strange things to people. It leaves gaps, and sometimes the wrong person slips into those gaps when all you are searching for is comfort. Then something shifted. Mom joined a widow support group. At first, she was hesitant, telling me it sounded depressing, but after her first meeting, she came home different. She told me she had spent hours listening to other women share their stories of losing their husbands, of trying to move forward, and of stumbling into their own Carls. She was not alone, and that mattered. Week by week, I saw her change. She began going to meetings regularly, started making friends with women who truly understood her pain, and even picked up hobbies she had abandoned when my dad died. She took a painting class, started gardening again, and rediscovered how much she loved cooking real meals instead of microwaving whatever was easiest. She began to laugh again, not the forced laughter she used with Carl, but real genuine laughter that came from a lighter place. The transformation has been incredible to watch. I realized that the support group was giving her something I could not. A community of people who knew exactly what it felt like to lose the love of your life, and then try to piece yourself back together. Slowly but surely, she has been reclaiming herself. She no longer brings up Carl. In fact, when his name slipped into conversation once, she waved her hand like brushing away a fly. He is just a footnote now, not a shadow looming over us. The woman who once defended him at every turn now calls that period her rhinestone mistake. She jokes about it, which is how I know she has truly moved forward. For the first time in years, I feel like I have my mom back. She smiles more, she talks about the future instead of just the past, and our home feels warm again instead of weighed down by someone who never belonged there in the first place. And the best part? When I look at her now, she does not seem burdened or desperate. She seems lighter. 2 weeks after Carl finally packed up his rhinestone jeans and walked out of our lives, I thought the whole saga was over. The house felt calmer, my mother was slowly reclaiming her peace, and I finally had my car back without someone tapping his tacky belt buckle against the console like he was keeping time for my suffering. I was ready to file the entire chapter away as a cautionary tale. But of course Carl was not done. Carl never just disappears quietly. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I was sitting at my desk at work trying to get through an uninspiring design brief, when my phone buzzed. At first I ignored it, figuring it was a notification or a spam call, but then another buzz came through. And another. I glanced down and froze when I saw the name. Carl. The man had the nerve to text me after everything. The first message said, "Hey kiddo." The second one said, "No hard feelings, right?" The third and final insult of the day read, "You'll always be my favorite chauffeur." I just sat there staring at the screen trying to process the audacity. This man had lived off my mom, drained her emotionally, used me like his personal Uber, and walked out when he was finally confronted. And his attempt at reconciliation, if you can even call it that, was to reduce me yet again to his driver. The lack of self-awareness was so breathtaking it was almost funny. I could feel my blood boiling in my veins. It was not sadness. It was not disappointment. It was pure fury mixed with disbelief. He had been out of the house for all of 2 weeks, and instead of showing even the tiniest shred of remorse, he was trying to sneak back in with some smug backhanded favorite chauffeur line, as if he expected me to laugh it off and keep the door cracked open for him. In that moment I realized something important. Carl was never going to change. Men like him do not wake up one day and suddenly grow self-awareness. He had walked into our lives at a time when my mother was vulnerable, taken advantage of her loneliness, treated me like a resource instead of a person, and then had the audacity to act like we should all just brush it off and stay friendly. It was never about family to him. It was about convenience. I could have responded. I could have unleashed every angry thought in my head, sent him paragraphs reminding him of all the times he humiliated me, all the nights he wasted my gas money, all the times he made my mother cry when he thought I was not listening. But I knew exactly what that would do. It would feed him. Carl thrived on attention, whether positive or negative. A reply of any kind would be an invitation for him to keep pushing, keep joking, keep trying to wedge himself back into our lives. So I did the only thing that would actually cut him off. I hit block. And I did it so fast my thumb practically dented the screen. For a split second, I swear I saw a puff of metaphorical smoke rise out of my phone from the sheer force of how badly I wanted him gone. I blocked him so fast I think my phone smoked. Remember Carl's so-called big job interview? The one he swore was going to get him back on his feet, the one I spectacularly tanked by never showing up to drive him? For weeks I wondered what kind of company would even consider hiring him. I pictured some small-time sales gig, maybe a car lot or some questionable door-to-door nonsense. But then, not long after Carl vanished from our lives, I got the full story, and it was better than I ever could have scripted. One Saturday I stopped at the grocery store where one of Carl's old drinking buddies, Jeff, worked part-time stocking shelves. Jeff was always friendly, the kind of guy who knew everyone's business without even trying. When he spotted me, he laughed and said he had to tell me something about Carl because it was too ridiculous to keep to himself. According to Jeff, Carl had been bragging for weeks about this so-called career-changing interview. He made it sound like he had some executive position lined up, something glamorous and life-changing. But in reality, the job was nothing more than a pyramid scheme. Carl had been gearing up to join one of those sketchy vitamin sales companies. You know the type, flashy brochures promising financial freedom, overhyped nutritional supplements no one actually needs, and endless pep talks about being your own boss. The kind of scheme where you spend your own money buying overpriced products, then try to rope in family, friends, and neighbors to do the same until everyone goes broke. As Jeff laid it out, I could practically hear Carl's voice in my head, imagining how he would have pitched it. He would have stood in our kitchen, puffed up with pride, waving around bottles of miracle vitamins and spouting lines about how this was the ground floor of $1 million opportunity. He would have tried to get my mom to invest in his little stash, would have cornered me about networking with my coworkers, and would have guilt-tripped everyone he knew into buying overpriced bottles of nonsense. The more Jeff explained, the clearer the picture became. Carl had not just been planning on using me as a taxi that day. He had been planning on dragging my mom and me into yet another one of his schemes, this time one that would have drained us financially instead of just emotionally. The so-called interview was nothing more than a glorified recruitment session. All he had to do was show up, pay some starter fee, and suddenly he would be part of the team. I could not stop laughing when I realized I had accidentally done us both a massive favor by refusing to drive him. He had been so angry, so self-righteous, claiming I had ruined his big break. Meanwhile, what I had actually ruined was his chance to become yet another middle-aged man trying to sell vitamins out of his trunk. I could picture it so clearly. Carl standing in some friend's driveway, unloading boxes of supplements, trying to convince skeptical neighbors that the pills in his hand were going to change their lives. And when that failed, I knew exactly what his next move would have been. He would have turned back to us. He would have begged my mom for money to cover his business expenses, or pressured me into buying bottles just to support him. It hit me that my little act of petty revenge, refusing to drive him to that meeting, had actually been the nail in the coffin for his latest scheme. Without transportation, he had no way to show up, no way to get recruited, no way to waste even more of our time and resources. For once, my spite had lined up perfectly with fate, and the outcome could not have been sweeter. Looking back, I realized that was probably the closest Carl ever got to what he thought was a real opportunity. But the truth is, it was nothing but smoke and mirrors, and deep down I think he knew it. That is why he was so desperate to get there. That is why he begged me over and over. He needed someone to validate his illusion that he was on the verge of success. And when I pulled the rug out from under him, his fantasy collapsed. So when people ask if I ever felt guilty for messing up that day, the answer is no. Not even for a second. If anything, I feel proud. Because instead of watching my mom's savings get drained into some vitamin scam, I got to watch Carl stomp off into irrelevance with nothing to show for it. And the satisfaction of knowing that he never got his big break makes me sleep just fine at night. I don't even regret messing that up. A funny detail I completely forgot to mention about my time with Carl is what happened whenever I blasted Disney Channel songs in the car. He had this ridiculous habit of trying to outcool them by singing along to Nickelback at full volume, thinking he could compete with Hannah Montana, Jonas Brothers, and even some early Miley Cyrus tracks. Do you know what it is like to have Nickelback and Hannah Montana blaring at the same time in a small Tesla? Pure chaos. The way their conflicting sound waves ricocheted off the leather seats made it feel like the car itself was screaming in protest. Carl would lean back, trying to act casual, mouthing the words as if he was fronting a rock concert, while I just laughed until tears streamed down my face. Every single ride turned into a battle of absurdity and volume, and I realized that the Tesla had never been a car before. It had been my stage, my shield, and for lack of a better word, my battlefield. I had turned what could have been another hour of unpaid chauffeur duty into sheer entertainment, and he had no clue I was orchestrating it. Fast forward to now, a few months after Carl's permanent eviction from our lives, Mom and I decided to take a little road trip. Just the two of us. The house felt different now that we were free from the shadow of him. It was light, calm, and ours. We mapped out a small route across a couple of states, filling the itinerary with roadside attractions, small diners, and quirky little motels with signs that looked like they belonged in a Wes Anderson movie. The Tesla came along, of course, and for the first time in years, the car was ours for something fun, not for ferrying an entitled manchild from one pointless destination to another. The trip itself was magical in a quiet way. For hours, the car echoed with our laughter, and for once, it wasn't fueled by chaos or Nickelback battles. It was just us, cracking jokes about bad roadside signs, trying to guess what ingredients were in mystery diner dishes, and making bets on who would spot the weirdest souvenir shop along the way. Mom would nudge me, and I would snort at the absurdity of the little competitions we created just to pass time. For the first time in years, we laughed until our stomachs hurt and our cheeks ached. No rhinestones, no Wolo slogans, no awkward forced bravado, just genuine moments between mother and daughter. One afternoon, somewhere in the middle of Kentucky, we pulled off the interstate at a gas station. The kind of dusty, quirky little stop that smells faintly of old coffee and motor oil, the kind that feels like a pause in time. While filling up the Tesla, Mom turned to me with a soft expression and said something that struck me deeper than anything Carl ever did. "Your dad would have loved this car." I could see her eyes glimmer with the memory of him, imagining the way he would have grinned, the way he would have found joy in the independence it represented. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about cars or rides. This wasn't just about battles with a rhinestone-wearing freeloading ex. It was about me fighting for the respect my dad always taught me to demand, the respect that he modeled in every action he took, the respect that Carl had completely failed to understand. On that trip, in that gas station parking lot with the sun cutting across the dashboard, I realized that those hours I spent tormenting Carl, blasting Disney songs, taking wrong turns and making him squirm had been a rehearsal of sorts. It was me reclaiming the control I had lost when life got messy after Dad died. It was me learning how to say no without guilt, how to set boundaries without apology, and how to preserve the space that was mine and mine alone. And Mom, she laughed with me at every little thing on that trip, but in a quiet, reflective way that told me she understood. She understood that this Tesla, this road trip, even the way I had handled Carl was more than just transportation. It was the living, breathing expression of the lessons Dad left behind. And for the first time in a long time, I could see her lighter, freer, fully present in the moment, appreciating the journey not as a way to escape loneliness, but as a way to celebrate the strength and resilience we carried forward together.